the NFL just being brutal on marriages. So many NFL athletes, they implode. I get emotional thinking about it because
every 100 people that can handle adversity, there's only one that can handle success.
If the cameras were always on us, who would you really be?
Can I trust you?
You can deny it all that you want. I am who God says I am.
People don't care how much you know until they know how much you...
All of that is a load, man. That's not true. The currency in the NFL is actually not money.
All right, today on PQ'd, I'm honored to welcome Kent Chevalier, a dynamic leader whose journey spans pastoral ministry, NFL chaplaincy, and motivational speaking. As the chaplain of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Kent brings a unique perspective on integrating faith into high-pressure environments. Through Team Chevalier, he and his wife, Erica, inspire individuals to embrace their God-given purpose with courage and authenticity. Kent, welcome to the show. All right, Kent, we're going to jump right in here. The first question really is around being the Pittsburgh Steelers chaplain. I know that it's unique and inspiring, your role that you have. What lessons from your journey would you share with millennials striving to find purpose in their careers?
Yeah, you know what's really wild about this is that Erica and I doing ministry together for 22 years and doing adult ministry in church context, now coming into the NFL, working alongside young adults. So our kids are the same age as some of these incoming rookies. And what's wild is that a lot of people think that their purpose is their job. And we got to do some digging there because that's not always the case. And so one of the ways that I try to teach this at the Steelers is that every time I have the opportunity to speak to the rookie class, I will hold up a football and I will essentially say something along the lines of, guys, if you build your foundation of your purpose upon a ball, then as soon as that ball is gone through injury, through you're getting traded, the career's done, nobody else is calling you. If you've built that foundation on a ball, then you're in trouble because that ball no longer loves you the way that you love that ball. And so in the same way that, working with young adults and millennials who might be listening to this, is that ball can represent all kinds of different things. It might be your paycheck. If you're building your life and your purpose upon chasing the money, and someday that money's not going to be there, or just the economy collapses, whatever it might be. If you build it on the foundation of chasing that money and then it's gone, then your purpose is gone, right? That could also be a relationship. If you think that your relationship is your purpose in life, whether that's getting married someday or whatever it might be, what happens if that person gets sick? Then that person can't be your purpose, and things like this. And so that's kind of how we teach purpose. So your purpose is never going to be a paycheck. Your purpose is never going to be a position. Your purpose will sometimes include you, but it will never be about you. So this is the thing, when we're chasing our purpose, we got to realize that it's actually it's well beyond those things that a lot of people strive after. And it is not those things.
Sure. It's interesting, I think, as you teach that, it's a concept that we can hear, right? I think it's a wonderful thing. But what happens typically in somebody's life, because you can talk about that, but until something actually happens, when they get to the bottom of the pit, they get to the hard place, that's typically where those things are like, oh, yeah, that's what that means, versus reading in a book and saying that's neat and move on. How do you see that happening in people's lives? How do they come to that understanding about purpose?
Yeah, I think in our line of work, with working alongside NFL athletes and coaches, so you begin to ask those questions when the game is taken away. For instance, a coach that just last year, man, so many things were going wrong in his life. The NFL is brutal on marriages. And so this young coach, he essentially walked through a divorce, therefore lost contact with his children on a regular basis. And he begins to ask these questions about his purpose. Who am I now? What does this mean for me? And then on top of that, he is no longer coaching in the NFL because, the contract was up and The stuff that was internal inside of him and the circumstantial stuff around him was too much drama. And so he's not in a job right now. So I think those are the times when we get squeezed, right? That we begin to discover who we really are, and we begin to ask those questions about purpose, identity. When the thing that we have built it upon is no longer there, or it's in trouble and it's shaky, you begin to ask those types of questions.
Yeah, sure. And to relate to you in the beverage industry, which is different than different than the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Coca-Cola. I always use the phrase that my blood didn't run Coke red. And what people said when they meant that or said that at the Coca-Cola company was that they had such loyalty, such identity in the Coke brand to the company. They dedicated so much time to that. But I had a little bit different purpose and meaning at the way I approached work. And so I knew that if those things changed, like at Coke, if I was no longer employed at the Coca-Cola company, that I wouldn't change, right? That purpose that I had in life. And so I think you're right, Kent, that if something is stripped away from us, that adversity that comes in, that makes us realize a little bit about the priorities of life and makes us think about our purpose and what does that really mean. So
That's
true
right.
on their end.
That's right.
Hey, let's go to this next thought to pull out of you here. It says millennials often face pressures to balance ambition with authenticity. How has your work and professional athletes with them shaped your perspective on leading with integrity and humility? How's it shaped that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And as I thought about it, here's what I, basically came up with is that you have to be authentically you at all times. And I live and do ministry and walk alongside men and women in the NFL who are constantly compared by analysts, ESPN. There's lists that are out there of who, statistics, and people talk about these folks that I get to walk alongside. And the more and more that I get to hang out and be able to influence these men, specifically for me, my wife with the ladies of the organization, here's what we basically say, man, is you have to be known for who you really are, your strengths and your weaknesses. That is ultimate humility. Humility is not saying, oh, shucks, I'm not really good at this. And that's false humility. True humility is saying, man, I'm really good at this. I'm not so good at this. And I'm here to serve however it is that you want me to serve the organization, to serve the leader, to serve the vision of the organization. And so I would encourage those who are trying to lead with integrity and character. It's this line of, well, if you're going to have the cameras on, so to speak, so for instance, at the Steelers this season, HBO Hard Knocks is in, and they basically catch you even what it feels like private moments, moments when you're just being and hanging around. If the cameras were always on us, who would you really be? And so these men in this particular setting, so all of their practices, everywhere that they go, there are cameras that are on them. And so how would we live any differently if we had those cameras on us at all times? And so I've just learned to say, like, hey, man, I've just got to be myself in public and in private. Just be uniquely me and bring those unique gifts to the table and tell people when I'm good at this, but I'm not good at this. That's okay to say. So I think that is leading out of integrity and this humility, saying, hey, I'm here to serve as well with the gifts that I've been given.
How often do you see that? Is it rare?
It's not as rare as you think, but with the cameras, there's a sense of professionalism where the cameras in the locker room or after media and all this stuff, they're only catching a certain glimpse and a front forward facing. So a guy, it's not that he's putting a different face forward. It's just that the story that can be created out of what it is that he just said, and that's maybe not even what that he meant, but that narrative can spin out of his control. depending on what it is that, a reporter or whatever might say.
Yeah.
But I have seen in these men, like they've lived in the camera, since really high school. And so they're not trying to, most of them, they're not trying to put on a show. They're no longer impressed by things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just, hey, this is who I am, especially at this level. This is who I am. This is what I bring to the table. Everybody knows it. You see the film, right? And I'm not trying to be anybody that I'm not.
That's so good. It's the phrase that I use. It says, you are who you are when you're all by yourself, typically,
Good.
right? And so if you are who you are when you're by yourself, also in front of a camera, there's that integrity, right? You're whole.
Right.
So the same person. So that's a wonderful feel on. I want to jump back into something, though. It's really making me curious because NFL is sexy, right? I know there's a lot of marketing behind it. And we had an initial conversation when I first met you. And you said that the NFL is a business.
Uh-huh.
And I shared with you that one of my mentors at Coca-Cola Company used to play for Joe Gibbs and the Redskins, the Commanders now. But he was a backup hog, if you will, and played in a Super Bowl. But he said the same thing. I mean, the NFL is a business. What does it mean?
Absolutely.
And then tell me also, too, Ken, I want to dig into this real quick. Tell me, why is it so hard on marriages for coaches and stuff like that?
Yeah. Great questions, man. So I think, the whole idea of it being a business, I mean, there's so much money in NFL football. It's expanding now internationally. And I think that, the drive to get there by 2028 and to have several games internationally. So it is a bottom line dollar business. And Coach T will sometimes, to kind of wake guys up to this reality, he will say, you are the product. We are the source. And he's not saying that to be like, hey, we're going to just use you, because he is a leader of men. He cares for men and their families. But he's trying to wake them up to the reality that the NFL, you are the product of the field. And how you perform on that field will determine your future in this business. And so that for us is a bit of a, how that applies to you and me, is that we can get so caught up in the performance mentality that I am how I perform. And we have to work hard to realize, no. I am who God says I am. And if I have a bad day, that doesn't mean that I am now a bad person.
That's right.
So we've got to do that. But then to answer your question about the NFL just being brutal on marriages, you just think about the amount of time that these men spend at the practice facility. So on any given day, you might have a coach who wakes up at 4:30 in the morning. He will get a workout in, he'll get his work, and man, they're going until sometimes 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And so there's also around, there's a, kind of tongue in cheek around the NFL where coaches have cots in their office. So they're sleeping there during the week, and then, hey, I'll see you essentially Friday night once the whole culture package install is ready for that week, and I'll come home Friday night. So the NFL can be absolutely brutal in the same way that, the other businesses, it's not any different than that. But man, it can be tough because there are some incredibly unique pressures for these men. For instance, when they're traveling, I have seen the lines of women who are in the hotel. And I've never experienced that. And so walking off of a bus, there's just immediate temptation. It's right there.
Oh, yeah.
I see it. And so, that causes me to pray for these men and their marriages, and for Erica and I to be passionate about helping marriages in the NFL. You got coaches who have been in this for a while, right? And they have kids who are older. So you might have a coach who his whole family, I don't know, pick a, area. They might be in Arizona while he's here coaching in Pittsburgh.
Right.
Dude, that's brutal on a family. So we want to just come alongside these men and women and serve them in that way. And there's so many other unique pressures of what that means for players in the NFL and their relationships.
Yeah, so good. So let's talk about the heart of the player and your role as a chaplain with the Steelers. How do you approach these young men and develop relationships with them, earn the right, I guess, to either help them grow in their faith or talk to them about the Lord. How do you approach all of that? I know, because it can't be, I guess you'd have to earn the right. Just because you show up doesn't mean you're there and you get the right to do it.
Yeah,
You've got to be able to walk alongside these men. But how does that work for you?
absolutely. So what's wild is I have the privilege that Coach Tomlin invites me to be a guest in the building every day. So I work for a group called Athletes in Action, and he invites me to have 100% access to the facility, to the team. And the fact that he will stand me up in front of the entire organization on day one of training camp, and he'll say, hey, this is another service that we want to provide to you, just like you have services for your body, just like you have services for your mind. I want to introduce to you Pastor Kent, and he is our chaplain. And here's what I'll basically say to these guys. Listen, I'm just here to come alongside of you. My wife and I, grown up in Pittsburgh our entire life, we're just here to serve. And I actually don't know anything about what you guys are dealing with between the white lines. Like, I don't know plays. I don't know how all that stuff works, but I'm here simply to serve you. And so I'll say something like this, because all these people who were just introduced are here to serve, and to, the masseuse is there for your body. The chiropractor is here for your body. You'll have the, teen clinician. He's here for your mind. And I will say, I'm here for your inside game. Because let's not forget, I mean, you can deny it all that you want, but what's going on inside of here in your heart, deep in your soul, is going to impact that field. And if you want to be the total athlete, then you better deal with what's going on the inside of you. It's those things that you lay your head on the pillow at night that keep you awake and you can't shake it. These are the things that I'm here to just simply talk with you if you want. And so this is how we come alongside that. And then, yes, I have to earn the right to be heard. The currency in the NFL is actually not money, it's trust. And so these guys.
Why is that trust? It's very interesting, but why is it
Yeah,
trust?
because everybody wants something from these guys. And so because they have some money, everybody has a handout to them. And in my role, I want them to know I will never ask you for anything. I'll never ask for an autograph. I'll never ask for money. I'll never ask anything, right? And so I have to prove that over time. And as I've proven that now, so I'm 6 seasons in, as I've proven that with the veterans of the team, it's getting a little bit easier, because essentially they'll go to the veteran and they'll say, hey, is this dude legit? Can I trust this guy? And then when they see the veteran talking to me and trusting me, then, dude, that helps me quicken that relationship with those rookies, with the new guys who are getting traded, things like that. But yes, you're exactly right. I've got to earn that right to be heard. And it starts with, can I trust this guy, that what I say to him is not going to get to the coaching staff. What I say to him is not going to get to the GM. And we have Erica and I hold confidence in the highest regard that we're a vault.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've got to earn that trust.
So play with me for a minute here. Let's talk and think about the millennials who are listening to this. What advice would you have for them in building trust outside of just football? But think about life. Think about just your point, the business world. How would they go about that, and why is that important?
Do you mean trust as in somebody will trust them?
Yeah, trustworthy or trusting somebody else. It's relationship, right? Is what you're trying to do, and you're trying to prove that out, and that you have no other interest in anything about the individual except for themselves, their heart, their mind, their soul, their well-being. And I've found, Kent, that in the business world, that if I can care about that other person, that's the old phrase, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so if you can show that over time and demonstrate that authentically, then that trust starts to come, because people are going to ask you, can I trust you? Can you help me? Do you care about me? And if you can answer those questions genuinely, authentically, then that trust develops. And then you can start to have some conversations like I'm sure you do, right?
Yeah. And I would say if those who are listening are trying to get people to trust them, maybe in business or whatever, when you asked that question, my first thought was, do what you say you're going to do.
So good. That's good.
Right? So if you tell somebody that you're going to do something, do it, and then report back. This is the quickest way to earn trust with a boss or a coworker.
So good.
Right? Another thing that I would say, man, if you are trying to get somebody to trust you, is to never, ever gossip. Don't be that person who's going to go to the side hall and talk about whoever's in the office doing these don't be that person ever. Because what's done in the depths and what's done in the secret is always going to find its way to the surface. And if you want to kill trust, then gossip about somebody or a circumstance in the office.
That's right.
Just get that stuff out of your life now.
Yeah.
Don't participate. Don't be baited into those side conversations. And I've just learned, like, hey, if somebody starts to say, hey, did you hear about, and I'll say, do they know you're telling me?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
It's those type, and they know that then you're becoming a serious person about confidence. And I'm not going to gossip about you, so you shouldn't be gossiping to me, that kind of thing.
That's right.
Man, I could spend so much time on, here's what I would also say. If you are trying to earn trust with a boss, then do things that you know need to be done without being asked.
Initiative.
Just do them.
That's good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Show that initiative and don't even seek the credit. Just do it. And because there's something that smiles inside of us when we actually go that extra mile, the second mile, as Jesus would teach us. When we go that extra mile, something smiles inside of us while the other person notices, and they're like, huh, they didn't even seek the attention. They didn't even seek the, hey, I want recognition for this. If you want to earn somebody's trust, don't seek that recognition. Just do the job.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing all of those, truth and the principles there. That's good. Hey, so I as I looked and did a little research on you, Kent, I learned that Erica plays a big role in what you guys do together,
absolutely.
right? Not only your bride, the mother to your children, but you guys are partners in all of this together. Tell me about how that works. How does that play out? Because I know per our conversation, obviously the NFL is tough on wives, marriages, all of that. What role do you all play in that, in making that sure that that's a thriving, flourishing opportunity versus something that is ends up in a bad place?
Yeah, man, I will never forget when Coach Tomlin was casting the vision for the chaplain position, and he said, I'm looking for a local Pittsburgh couple to pastor this team. And dude, my heart, I was like, wait a second, I get to do this with Erica? Are you kidding me? And so we approach it very much as, it's almost like we're, to the young players and their wives or girlfriends, it's almost like we're spiritual parents. Even things like, we have taken it upon ourselves to, within our circle of influence of trusted babysitters, we will, almost vet all of them and say, hey, if you're looking for a babysitter that you can trust for your little one, this person is really good and qualified. We know them personally. So it's almost even just mentoring, spiritual mentoring, coming alongside them. And so programmatically, what that looks like is that I will provide Bible studies every week. So a separate Bible study for coaches, separate Bible study for players. I will provide chapel, a non-denominational chapel before every game, the night before the game. Everybody in the organization is invited who wants to be a part of that. And then on Erica's side, she runs Bible studies for all the players' wives and girlfriends, Bible studies for the coaches' wives, separate Bible study for the front office ladies. And so then we're all about developing relationships. So we have couples over all the time to try to invest in their life. No agenda, just, hey, how are you guys doing? Navigating a brand new city. This is difficult. Mm-hmm. And then especially when people get traded, like we want to be there because the wife, the family is always left picking up the pieces because the guy has to get on a plane like in an hour and he's got to be in that new NFL city like right now. So we want to help and come alongside in that way. So we really see it as a team effort. She and I love doing this together.
Mhm.
And while she's not allowed in the practice facility because, the ladies aren't allowed, the girlfriends and the wives aren't allowed in the practice facility. All of Erica's ministry, if you will, is in their homes and coffee shops in our home, while mine really takes place in the practice facility, in the stadiums, on the team plane, in the team hotel. But then when we come to those couples ministry moments, that's where we really work together
Yeah,
on those things.
that's awesome. Great to have a partner like that. Makes a big difference, doesn't
Absolutely.
it? Hey, tell me this wasn't a question that I
Sure.
threw on our brief, but tell me about what a day looks like in your life.
Yeah. So I'll just take today, for instance. I always want to try to be there for the team meeting, so we, start every day with a team meeting. Then when those guys go and they have all their meetings that I'm not allowed to be in, this is when I'm working on Bible studies, chapels, things that I'm preparing to preach, that kind of thing. Then practice happens, and I'm always out at practice because what's crazy is that you just never know what kind of conversation will take place in between periods of practice. So I've just learned to hang out on the sideline, and there's something that's bothering a guy. And so he knows he only has 10 minutes because that's how long the periods are for practice. So you might have a guy on defense who comes over and he says, "Hey, PK, can I just ask you a question about," knowing that he can get out of that conversation it pretty quickly. And so it's just the ministry of availability. And then right after, practice, those guys have a bunch of film that they have to study from practice, or they have their unit meetings. So I'm not allowed to be in those sessions. So I will then more work of whatever it is that I've got to get done. And then it's always relational at dinner. So trying to have that time with guys where I'm just available in the cafeteria and guys will sit down, and it's all about relationships that lead to hilarious conversations or deep conversations. And so that's what a typical day looks like. And then we have our couples stuff in the evenings, one night a week. I'll have chapels, on Saturday nights in a team hotel if they play on Sunday. So there's a really unique rhythm to the NFL season, and you just try to keep up with it because the NFL runs at 100 miles per hour.
I bet. Yeah, a lot driving it. I want to shift real quick gears for a second and ask you, I first became familiar with you looking and watching your posts on LinkedIn, which I love. Thank you for that. And
For sure.
I've always been intrigued by the end of the game where you have both teams come together and believers, they pray, right, during that moment. But one of the phrases that you use is deflect the glory. And by the way, I know you have hoodies coming out pretty soon. I'll order one soon, so looking forward to that.
That's right.
But there's this idea that we've got adversity that we have to deal with, right? So we may lose a football game, we still go over and pray. Or we win the football game, we still go do that. But this idea of deflect the glory, and I want to throw one thing out there. There's this phrase, I think it was Thoreau that said that for every one person that can every 100 people that can handle adversity, there's only one that can handle success.
Let
that sink in. So it's easier to go through adversity, but somebody gets success, it's tougher to handle, right? Sure. That could be argued, but the point is this, is that, things can go to your head and all that. That's and right. Not deflect the glory, but you soak it in. Tell me a little bit about your thought on that and how people can deflect the glory and manage success, if you will.
Yeah, that's good. And I'll start with the guys that I have the privilege to serve and come alongside, because that whole prayer at the 50 has been around for a really long time in the NFL, since the 70s, I believe. And it's a moment where, competitors can come out in a brotherhood of unity, grab a knee, grab a hand. And here's what they do. Here's always what happens. And I started to notice this. It was like a repetitive prayer, if you will, where they give thanks to God for the opportunity that they have to play the game that they love, that they've been playing since they were little boys. But then they always, hey, we praise you, God, for the one who gave us the ability, who gave us the talent. And I watched as they deflected that glory back to God. But then there was this piece that I felt like was missing. And so I did this chapel talk, 5, 6 seasons ago. Basically, the idea where Deflect the Glory came from was this idea that millions of people for those 3 hours have been worshiping these men. And what they need to do very quickly, because they're not built for that kind of worship, that kind of glory, to take that in, to absorb that, and to keep it. So in that moment of going out to the 50 now, I call that the Deflect the Glory moment, because God, I'm deflecting that worship right back to you. And I want people to know that. I need myself to know that. And so in the same way with you and me, we have so much to be thankful for. The opportunities that God has given to us, the jobs that we have, the paycheck that he provides, so much to be thankful for. And we can, like you said, the success can go to our head to think that I'm the one who's doing this. So all that praise, all that accolades, all those attaboys, those emails and social media, it feels good.
Right.
But I need to be really quick to recognize that God is the one who's given me these things. And I need to deflect, at least in my heart, I need to deflect even with my words. You know what? This is all about God. This is all about, the purpose that he has for my life. And so that's what I mean by Deflect the Glory. And you and I can participate in that exact same thing each and every day. When I might be speaking somewhere and somebody says, oh, great job, man, I'll just say, I'm just having a blast with what God has given to me, things like that.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't, because I know that God's gifted me as a communicator. I don't like false humility, that thing, but I'm very quick to say, I'm just grateful to even have this opportunity and that God would trust me to steward this platform that he's given to me. So that's what I mean. And I think we can all do that in some way, shape, or form.
I love that. I'm sitting here smiling. I learned a long time ago, Kent, and I don't do as much speaking as you do. But when I do have a chance, whether it was working with the Coca-Cola company or outside now in my practice, when somebody comes up to me and says, nice job, or gives me the accolade or whatever, I've learned to deflect the glory. But one of the things I do with that individual is I ask him, I appreciate that. Is there a takeaway? Right. What was your takeaway?
Good.
Right. And I always ask them, because then I get them to think and tell me. And if something registers with them versus just a good performance, that they actually took something away, that's where that intrinsic, oh, that's great thing goes inside of me and says, all right, we made a connection there. So that was positive.
That's good. Really good. And one of the things that I felt like I was to start practicing when I come off of a platform and people come up and there's lines and things like this is I will take the time and I will ask, what is your name?
I love it.
Because, right, and I'll introduce myself as I shake their hand. Hey, I'm Kent. What's your name? And they're taken back in the sense of like, well, I know your name. You were just up there on the stage. But it does something in me to help me remind that this is not just an audience. These are individual people that God just used me to impact, to encourage, to challenge, to whatever it is that they're about to talk to me about. I want to know their name. And that's just really important to me because we've all been in those lines. We've all been in and you've been handled, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to be that guy because I hope to enhance the reputation of God in every encounter that I have. And I believe that starts with the name because God knows their name.
I love that. That's so good. That's something I'm going to put into practice, and I hope our listeners will too as they do it. It's the dignity of the individual, right? And
Absolutely.
Dale Carnegie said something to the effect in How to Win Friends and Influence People. The sweetest sound in any language is a person's own name.
That's right.
Right. So if you can hear that and give that to the other person, that's really good. Hey, a couple of the questions before we move into the lightning round. I did want to take some time and talk quickly about the Do It Afraid, your keynote that you do. Out there. Tell us about the genesis of that, because I think one of the things that we all struggle with is the fear of failure or rejection. And I'd love to hear about how that started and your thoughts around that.
Yeah, Do It Afraid is the keynote that I give, and it's really mine and Erica's story of how we became chaplains to the Steelers, because essentially what thought was in the interview process as we were walking through this whole thing, as Vance McDonald, who was attending my church, and he said, hey, the Steelers don't have a chaplain. God was messing with me big time. He didn't even know it. I was in a 2-year waiting pattern of God messing with my life. I knew something was coming. Something was next. And when he shared that with me, something jumped inside of me like, pay attention here. Long story short, he introduced me to Coach Tomlin, and I thought that I was getting the interview to be hired by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, this was like, are you kidding me? I get to do this? Like, wow. So when he offered me the position, because I was a pastor in the city of Pittsburgh, loved the church that I was doing. I could just tell God was up to something. And when Coach Tomlin laid out the vision for the chaplain role, I loved everything about the position. What, I get to do this with Erica. This is awesome. You're going to hire her too? Like, this is crazy. But then he said this phrase, it will echo in my heart, in my soul. He said this position's not hired by the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would love for you to consider joining the staff of Athletes in Action. And it was like time stopped, and I knew exactly what that meant, because I've known people who've worked for Athletes in Action. And if your listeners don't know, Athletes in Action is the sports ministry, international sports ministry of Cru, formerly known as Campus Crusade for Christ.
Right.
And I had known people who worked for Athletes in Action that they have to raise 100% of their salary, all their benefits, and all of their ministry budget. And so in my mind at that point, I began to shut the whole thing down and having a conversation with God in the back of my mind as Coach Tomlin is still talking. I'm not hearing a word that he's saying, because obviously in my heart, God was putting his finger on the very thing that I was trusting in. I was trusting in a paycheck. I was trusting in a consistent position. Mm-hmm. I was trusting in a person, me, providing for my family. And so when Coach Tomlin was saying, you're going to have to raise your entire salary and your wife's salary to do this, I was like shutting it all down in my mind. Long story short for the podcast here today is that over time, God convinced us in a 3-week period that we had to make the decision if we were going to do this or not. God used some really unique circumstances that if people want to, hear that whole story, they can at some point, and I can tell that. Essentially what Erica and I decided to do, because bottom line was we were afraid to step out like that and to raise our salary as missionaries. And nobody would blame me, because I have 3 daughters, teenage daughters.
Sure. I
was staring college in the face. I've got wet, my daughter's about to get married. And so still, I'm just going okay, yeah. God, you got to do this. Yeah. And he is, and he's faithfully, providing. But at that moment, Erica and I were still scared. And my fear was fighting my faith. It's not that I didn't trust God, but I mean, come on, I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to be honest. I'm authentic with you. I was flat out scared for my future. But I could not deny that this was something that God was telling us to do. He wasn't asking us, he was telling us. And so straight up, we would have been disobedient if we didn't step into this. And so as I tell our story, I say, even though Erica and I were afraid, we decided that we were going to step out and do it anyway. So we stepped in the face of fear, trusting we're not sure how we're going to raise all this money. God, this is your problem, basically. You got to help a brother out. And so I used that keynote, and I kind of changed directions. And I'll say the reason that I share my story all over the country at this point is because I wonder if there's anybody listening who might be comfortable, who might be trusting in a paycheck, who might be trusting in a position, who might be trusting in a person themselves or somebody else instead of God. But you know that God has put something in you that you are supposed to be doing, and for whatever reason, Your parents talked you out of it. Your husband, you name it. You've talked yourself out of it, but God won't let it go inside of you. In your know where you know you're supposed to do something. And he's not going to let you off the hook until you do it afraid. You step into it. You do it anyway. In the face of fear, you have trust in God, have trust in that purpose, have trust in that calling that God is going to provide. And that's our story, man. We're still doing this afraid, and we're watching God provide in ways, man, it's amazing to me. Like the stories that God has provided in ways, like I get emotional thinking about it because, bro, like it's stretched our faith in ways that we didn't even know that we needed to be stretched. Our faith was dead in certain ways, and he brought it alive again. And so this Do It Afraid story is really a testimony about, look at what God has done. Wow, man, I'm getting emotional here.
Amen,
So
brother.
I appreciate you
that's
asking
awesome.
that.
No, that's so good. It sounds like to me, Kent, you came to this crisis of belief, even in that flash moment when the offer was made, right? And then it lasted for a little bit, but that's where we're invited into God's work, and then you come into this crisis of belief, and then we have this choice to obey and trust him in that. And I thank you for taking that step and continuing to take that step and being a blessing that you are with the Steelers, with the families of the players, the hearts of the players, and all that, and the way you're ministering to them. That's fantastic. So thank you.
Absolutely, man.
Hey, let's move. Let's have some fun real quick here. I want to ask you real quick. This is not, you don't know that, I didn't know this question. I would love to know what you do for fun. What do you do for fun?
Oh man. So what's wild is that all my college boys and like my cousins and stuff, we still play fantasy football, man.
Do you?
So I love playing fantasy football and talking trash with all my cousins and my college roommates. So that's a blast. I love
How are you doing this season?
I'm right in the middle of the pack, man. Okay. So I'm gonna make the playoffs.
Can you make a move, huh?
Yeah, that's right. That means I'm not going to be in the toilet bowl this year.
That's a good place to not be, right? All right. Hey, what's the most unusual job that you've ever had, and what did you learn from it? The most unusual job that Kent's had, and what did you learn from it?
Man, I would have to say, so at Geneva College, when my mom worked there in the food service, I got my summer jobs there at Geneva. And the most unique job that I ever did was work on the maintenance department. And there are things that like I learned about listening to my direct report, who was, he was a wild man. Like I could tell you so many stories about Paul. Love this dude. He was hilarious, but man, he knew what he was doing, and I was just hired labor. And if I didn't listen to what it is that he was telling me to do, my goodness, I was going to, it's that if you go one direction, like 1 degree off with a compass, you're going to end up so far, when you're walking a mile. It's that concept. So I needed to listen very closely to Paul because I'm so not handy. It's hilarious. And I was doing things that required me to be handy.
Right.
Like laying concrete, building patios. I'm like, bro, I should just be getting you tools. But he was forcing me to learn, and I had to listen to be able to learn how to do those things. So, man, that was a fun job.
Yeah, and valuable skill, right? And sometimes when we get in those situations, we don't realize that that's going to transfer to things like you're doing now, right?
That's right. Exactly.
How to listen to people. It's a critical leadership skill and just human relations skill. How about this one? It says, if you could live in any fictional universe, which one would it be and why? Fictional universe.
Fictional universe. So we talking like Marvel here, man.
There you go. Could be Marvel. What would you do?
Absolutely. Man, I think in that whole, it's a beautiful picture of what I think is the physical world and the spiritual world that we live in between, right? And so I think, those moments where the sky opens up in the Marvel movies, man, I would love to see that and see what that looks like and be on the front lines of what God is doing in the spiritual realm that you and I cannot see, with our physical eyes.
Yes.
But we intuitively can know and feel that it's happening around us. I would love to see that realm.
Yeah.
and be there. So like the Marvel when the sky opens, man. That's how I kind of picture it.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be a blessing just to have our eyes? Well, might or might not be, but to have our eyes open to what was going
That's
on
right.
around us would be kind of
That's right.
interesting. Hey, what's one thing on your bucket list that you haven't done yet, Kent?
Someday I want to travel where Jesus' feet were, his physical feet. So, man, I would love to get to the Holy Land someday. That's on the bucket list. Erica and I, man, I would love to go with her and for us to experience that together, because I have heard that when people go there and then the words of Jesus, the words of Paul, they just get louder. They make more sense where you see the physical places where Jesus taught. Man, I would love to see that so that the scriptures can come even more alive into my heart and that I could teach them more effectively.
Yeah, that's so good. My wife and I had a chance to go a couple years ago with Passion City Church here in Atlanta.
Sweet. All right.
Before things happened there, us and 1,000 of our best friends. But it was a big group that went over. But yeah, I hear you. I always tell people, Kent, that it's not a requirement to be a Christian to go to Israel, but it sure helps bring things to life. To your point, you see it over there. Hey, two more for you real quick. If you could instantly relive your one moment in your life, what would it be? One moment in your life, reliving it, what would it be?
I'd go back to my wedding day.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I mean, just right off the top of my head there were so many things about that day that I felt like I don't even remember. And I would love to slow that down and to just be able to take in, because some of the people who are a part of our wedding party and people who are at our wedding day, they're the people who mean the most to us.
Sure.
And you don't even get to talk to them. You don't even get to hang out and all. So I would love to go table by table very slowly and have conversations and catch up and all those things on our wedding day. And then I wrote a song for Erica for our wedding day, and I performed it.
Can you sing it now?
Her.
Will you sing it now for me? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. I won't put you on the spot.
Erica, if you look on social media, you look at her eyes, and they're just absolutely beautiful. They are breathtaking eyes. And so I wrote this song called Heavenly Eyes, and I would love to go back and be in that moment to see the interaction of what's going on in her heart. And you can watch a wedding video, but it wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so good. It sounds like you're the romantic between the two of you. I don't know Erica, but my wife accuses me of the same, so that's okay. Hey, last question here. What's a piece of advice that you received that sounded strange, but it turned out it really...
The first one that pops into my head. So my dad, he just passed this summer, and he shared a word of advice with me as a very young man. And it was probably 16, 17 years old. And we had just won a championship. And I think it was this moment where I am an emotional guy. Like as you just saw, right? I've been called the crying pastor. So I'm just deeply passionate, deeply emotional guy. And I was really struggling with the fact that as a result of winning this game, I was crying, and I was and I was almost hiding. And my dad looked at me and he said, "Don't you ever be afraid to cry. Real men cry." And that has stuck with me. And maybe because like he just intuitively knew that I was an emotional kid. I was going to grow into be an emotional man, a passionate guy. And so that advice, for any dudes, like I feel like some of us have been told that we got to man up, and sometimes man up means that we can't show our true colors and be our true selves and show our emotions when we're struggling, especially dudes who, like, we've been told we can't talk things out, and all of that is a load, man. That's not true. And so I would love to give the advice to any dudes who are listening and any ladies who are going to be married to a dude or are, that let your guy let it out. Encourage him to do so. If you're a dude, man, you got to talk. I have watched so many NFL athletes, so many coaches who eventually they implode because they're not letting out what's on the inside, and it's actually impacting their performance. So I would encourage you to just be you, be the real, emotional you, if that's you, because that's me. And I've just learned I've got to get comfortable with being who I am.
That's great advice. Yeah. I always felt that if a man is crying, it's not a sign of weakness, but it's actually a sign of strength, right? In my mind. And I've got a good biblical reference, the verse that said Jesus wept. So if he wept, I guess I can weep too.
There we go. I'll take it.
I'll take that one. Hey, Kent, you have been a blast to have on today. I can't tell you how honored and humbled I am to have you on here, not only to talk about the NFL, but to talk about your ministry to the heart of the player. And then your partnership with Erica, that was neat to hear. I loved exploring your Deflect the Glory piece and some of the background on that. That was really good. And then Do It Afraid, man. What a message about being courageous and stepping into things. So thanks for taking time. It's the middle of the season right now. You left practice early to be on here today. So hopefully Coach T doesn't get upset with you on all that stuff.
It's all good, man. It's all good. I'm encouraged to be with you, so I really appreciate you having me on.
You bet, Kent. Thanks. Take care. Hey, thanks for tuning in to P Cubed. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Were you inspired by today's conversation? Hey, do me a favor and share it with a friend or a colleague. And for more insights, visit the show notes to connect with Kent, explore Team Chevalier, and learn more about his speaking engagements. And don't forget to follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram for updates and inspiration. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Take care and talk soon.